If you've ever compared notes with a friend or a sibling about when your Social Security check arrives and noticed your dates don't match, even though you're both retired and collecting the same kind of benefit, I want to clear up exactly why that happens. It's not random, and it's not a mistake. There's a specific, predictable system behind it. And once you know which group you fall into, you'll know exactly which day to expect your payment every single month for the rest of the year. This comes up constantly in comment sections and conversations I have with people watching this channel. Someone mentions their payment landed on a particular Wednesday, someone else says theirs came on the 3rd, and a third person says theirs always arrives on the 1st. And there's a brief moment of confusion before everyone realizes they're simply talking about 3 completely different, equally valid schedules. None of those people are wrong, and none of them are experiencing some kind of error. They're each on a different track within the same overall system. Today I'm going to walk you through exactly how this schedule works, the 4 different groups that determine your specific payment day, what happens when that day lands on a weekend or holiday, and a strange quirk that occasionally makes it look like you got paid twice in one month, or not at all. If you're not subscribed yet, take a moment and do that now and turn on the bell. Small administrative details like this rarely get explained clearly, even though they affect your monthly budgeting directly. That's what this channel is for. Subscribe, and let's get into it. Let's start with the most common misunderstanding. A lot of people assume Social Security pays everyone on the same day each month, usually picturing the 1st of the month, the way many private pensions or salaries work. That's not how Social Security operates. Instead, the agency spreads payments across several different days based on a few specific factors about your situation. This isn't arbitrary. Spreading out millions of payments across multiple days each month helps the system process and distribute funds more smoothly, rather than trying to push every single payment through on one single day. This staggered system has actually been in place since 1997. When the Social Security Administration moved away from paying everyone on the same date and introduced the birth date-based Wednesday schedule, specifically to handle the growing volume of beneficiaries more efficiently. Before that change, payments were more heavily concentrated around the start of the month, which created processing bottlenecks as the number of beneficiaries grew over the following decades. Anyone who was already receiving benefits at the time of that 1997 change was generally allowed to stay on their existing 3rd of the month schedule rather than being shifted onto the new system, which is exactly why that grandfather clause still exists today, nearly 3 decades later. So let's go through the 4 groups that actually determine your payment date. The first group is anyone who receives supplemental security income, often called SSI. If SSI is the only benefit you receive, your payment arrives on the 1st day of the month. This is a separate program from regular Social Security retirement, survivor, or disability benefits, and it runs on its own, simpler schedule. The second group covers 2 specific situations. If you started receiving Social Security benefits before May of 1997, or if you receive both Social Security and SSI together, your Social Security payment arrives on the 3rd day of the month, regardless of your birth date. This group exists largely because of how the payment system was structured before the staggered, birth date-based schedule was introduced. And anyone who was already receiving benefits under that older system generally stayed on the 3rd of the month going forward. The third group is everyone else, meaning most people who started receiving Social Security retirement, survivor, or disability benefits after May of 1997 and who don't also receive SSI. For this group, your specific birth date determines which Wednesday of the month you get paid. If your birthday falls between the 1st and the 10th of your birth month, you're paid on the 2nd Wednesday of each month. If your birthday falls between the 11th and the 20th, you're paid on the 3rd Wednesday. And if your birthday falls between the 21st and the 31st, you're paid on the 4th Wednesday. I want to make sure that's completely clear with an example. Say your birthday is October 12th. Since the 12th falls between the 11th and the 20th, you're in the 3rd Wednesday group every single month. regardless of what month it actually is. If you wanted to know your exact payment date in any given month, you'd simply look up which day is the third Wednesday of that specific month, and that's your payment date. Now here's a detail that's easy to overlook, but matters when planning around your budget. If your regularly scheduled payment date happens to fall on a Saturday, Sunday, or federal holiday, your payment doesn't get pushed later. Instead, it gets moved earlier, arriving on the last business day before that date. This is meant to make sure you're not left waiting through a weekend or holiday for money you were counting on. This rule occasionally creates a quirk worth knowing about in advance, so it doesn't catch you off guard. If the first of a month falls on a Sunday, for example, an SSI payment that would normally arrive on the first instead gets paid on the last business day of the previous month, meaning it could show up before that month even technically begins. From the outside, this can look like you received an extra payment in one month and then none at all the following month, when in reality, the same number of payments happened, just shifted slightly earlier than usual due to the calendar. If you ever see this happen, it isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's the holiday rule working exactly as designed. I also want to mention a related situation that affects a smaller number of people. If you live outside the United States, if your state pays your Medicare premiums on your behalf, if you receive both Social Security and SSI, or if you filed for Social Security benefits before 1997, your payment is scheduled for the third of the month, following the same weekend and holiday adjustment rule as everyone else. This means a handful of different circumstances all route you into that same, simpler third of the month schedule, separate from the staggered Wednesday system. There's one more detail about timing that confuses a lot of people, especially anyone who's recently started receiving benefits. Social Security pays you a month behind. The payment you receive in any given month is actually for the previous month. So the deposit that lands in your account in February is your January benefit, and the one arriving in March is your February benefit. If you're new to receiving benefits, this can feel like your first payment is unexpectedly delayed, when in reality, the system is simply working exactly as designed. Your very first payment will always feel like it's arriving late relative to when your benefits technically started, purely because of this 1 month behind structure, not because of any error or delay specific to your account. I also want to touch on a related shift that's been happening recently. The Social Security Administration has been moving away from paper checks entirely, following a federal directive aimed at phasing them out in favor of electronic payments. If you're still receiving a paper check by mail, it's worth setting up direct deposit through your My Social Security account sooner rather than later, both because electronic payments tend to be more reliable in terms of timing and because paper checks are increasingly being phased out as the default option going forward. Let me walk through what this looks like across a full month just to make the pattern as concrete as possible. In a given month, you might see SSI payments go out on the 1st, the third of month group get paid on the 3rd, the second Wednesday group get paid roughly a week later, the third Wednesday group the following week, and the fourth Wednesday group near the very end of the month. From the outside, it can look like Social Security is paying people scattered throughout the entire month, and in a sense it is, but every single person within that spread is on a fixed, predictable schedule that repeats the same way every month, tied to their own specific birth date or circumstance. Knowing exactly which day you fall into opens up a genuinely useful budgeting habit that a lot of people never think to set up. Once you know your specific payment day, you can align your recurring bills, your mortgage or rent, utility payments, insurance premiums around that same general window each month, rather than scheduling them based on when you happen to remember to pay them. For example, if you're in the fourth Wednesday group, meaning your payment tends to land late in the month, scheduling automatic bill payments for early in the following month, rather than right at the start of the current month, can help avoid the kind of timing mismatch that sometimes leads to an overdraft or a late fee on something that would have been easily covered if the due date and the payment date were better aligned. This is a small adjustment, but it removes a recurring source of stress for a lot of people living on a fixed monthly income. So here's what I want you to actually do with this information. First, figure out which of the four groups applies to you. If you only receive SSI, you're on the first of the month. If you started receiving Social Security before May 1997, receive both Social Security and SSI, live abroad, or have your Medicare premiums paid by your state, you're on the third of the month. Otherwise, look at your birth date. 1st through the 10th means the second Wednesday. 11th through the 20th means the third Wednesday. 21st through the 31st means the fourth Wednesday. Second, once you know your group, you can look ahead at any calendar and identify your exact payment date for any upcoming month, which is especially useful for planning around bills, due dates, or other expenses that land around the same time each month. Third, log into your My Social Security account at ssa.gov, where you can view your specific payment history and upcoming scheduled payments directly, rather than calculating it yourself every time. This is also the fastest way to confirm your group if you're ever unsure. Fourth, remember the weekend and holiday rule. If your expected date falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or federal holiday, look for your payment on the last business day before that date instead, rather than assuming something went wrong when the calendar date itself doesn't show a payment. Fifth, if your payment genuinely doesn't arrive on your expected date, even after accounting for weekends and holidays, the official guidance is to wait at least 3 business days before contacting Social Security directly, since payments occasionally take a short additional time to process through your specific bank, even when sent on schedule. If 3 business days pass with still no payment, that's the point to call Social Security directly at 1-800-772-1213. Let me answer 2 more questions I hear often about timing specifically. What happens if you switch banks or update your direct deposit information? Your payment schedule itself, meaning which day of the month you're paid, doesn't change based on your bank. What can change is exactly how quickly your new bank posts the deposit once Social Security sends it, which is generally fast, but can occasionally vary by a business day depending on your specific bank's processing. It's worth updating your direct deposit information through your My Social Security account as soon as you switch banks, rather than waiting to avoid any payment being sent to a closed account. And if you're brand new to receiving benefits, when does your very first payment actually arrive relative to when you applied or were approved? Because of the 1-month behind structure I described earlier, your first payment typically arrives in the month following the first month you were eligible, on whichever scheduled date applies to your specific group. This means there's often a gap of a few weeks to a couple of months between approval and that very first deposit, which catches a lot of new beneficiaries off guard if they're expecting payment to start immediately upon approval. Here's the honest, full picture one more time. Social Security doesn't pay everyone on the same day. Your specific payment date depends on whether you receive SSI alone, the first of the month, whether you fall into the third of the month group, due to starting benefits before May 1997, receiving both Social Security and SSI, living abroad, or having your Medicare premiums paid by your state, or whether your birth date places you on the second, third, or fourth Wednesday of each month. Weekends and holidays shift your payment earlier, never later, and the My Social Security account at ssa.gov can confirm your exact schedule whenever you need it. This is one of those topics that feels small on the surface, but actually solves a real recurring source of monthly confusion once you understand it clearly. Knowing your exact day means one less thing to wonder about, and one more piece of your monthly budget you can plan around with real confidence instead of guesswork. It's also a good reminder that a lot of what feels confusing about dealing with a large government program isn't actually complicated once someone walks you through the specific rule that applies to you, rather than a generic version that might not match your situation at all. If you know someone who's ever wondered why their Social Security payment lands on a seemingly random day each month, send them this video. Once they know which of these groups they're in, that confusion disappears completely, every single month going forward. That's what this channel is here for. I'll see you in the next one.